What do you think of the last scene where I believe it's a Spanish woman? She traps you in a room and tries to seduce you. Well, not seduce you, basically initiate rape.
Well, I mean, it's it's one of those things, and I think it's funny, but it's one of those things that nowadays,
And he gets a good zinger where he says, "I finally fucked you," as he traps her in the room.
yeah, yeah, and uh, and that ends, and literally that was the final end of the call. And speaking, we spoke about Slaughterhouse-Five. Danny's reading Vonnegut in this play too. When she comes and she starts massaging him, she's constantly putting her hands on. And then we find out at the end of the play that she then started harassing the nervous guy, Davy Boy. And then there's another woman there that Danny almost has sex with, a married woman. Forget what I call her. What did I call her? Leanna, I think. Leanna.
You know that the Spanish woman was stealing from the bank as well.
Yeah, she was. She ended up stealing, and I talk about how the money there had been a few missing bits of money before she came, but that gave her the perfect opportunity to say, well, it couldn't be me because it started before it happened. But I did find out 6 months or a year later that she did get fired. But I wanted to just mention the married woman. Here we see Danny again showing a sense of principles that I do have a handful of times through the plays. We've seen Danny be unscrupulous, but we've also seen him show principles, especially with some of the girls. And here's a good example where Danny doesn't want to have sex with her because she's still legally married. And what happens a few days after, they don't have sex? She's going after the Johnny No character.
Mm. Yeah, I think this was a great play. I thought Long and Long Ago was a bit funnier, but I did think that it was amusing and just showing outside of the quote unquote blue collar jobs. I think this is sort of the first example of something where I saw frontline employees interacting in an interesting way, usually in the break room or something.
Mm-hmm.
And the sort of camaraderie that enacts, where people are stationary through most of their work life, but they enact some kind of bond.
Yeah, well, and I think the best example of that is the character of Davy Boy, because
Yeah.
we get him as hyper, and he's constantly missing things. And this other guy, Gene and Danny, have this conversation going back and forth, and then at some point they don't plan it, but they start throwing nonsense words back and forth. And Davy's going like, I don't get it. What do you got? Danny and Gene are sort of making fun of him and laughing at him, and he doesn't understand it, and he's having a nervous breakdown. Then we find out, we hear about it off stage. He's been robbed at gunpoint, and now he's even more nervous in the second half of the play. So he's a great character, and he was a funny kid. I still think about him sometimes, even though I wasn't as close with him as I was with the three other females. But
Similar to Long, Long Ago, it has sort of the bookend scenes that begin and end the play, where the 23-year-old Danny. It's interesting how you use memory in different ways. 23-year-old Danny is channeling the older Danny as he monologues, and then the end scene too, where he passionately talks about how art is a verb and not a noun. Uh, that's sort of channeling his future self as well.
yeah, and then the ending there, he says, it, I don't know if you got the references, but it ends with two sentences. He says, "Yes, somebody up there likes me," which is the title.
Jimmy Durante.
What?
Jimmy Durante. He used that as a sign off.
No, that's Mrs. Calabash. That's Jimmy Durante. But somebody up there likes me is the title of an autobiography of a boxer named Rocky Graziano from the 1940s and 50s, same era as Raging Bull, Jake LaMotta, and it was made into a movie in the 1950s. And then he goes, "Good night, Mrs. Calabash, wherever you are." But clearly, the Mrs. Calabash that Danny's talking about is Mo Gonzalez, because whether she's married or not, it doesn't matter. Mrs. Calabash was the sign-off that Jimmy Durante would have on his old radio shows and then later on some TV specials, and no one ever knew who Mrs. Calabash was. It was just sort of a name, I guess, he plucked out.
Yeah,
For some,
I wasn't aware of the reference, and I thought it was I wasn't sure what it meant, so I looked it up and found that. But at first, I thought it was sort of ended like so and so reclining on her couch.
so and
Uh,
so.
so and so reclining on her couch. The Stevens poem.
Okay. No, yeah, I wanted that because that ending gives a sense that Danny knows too that he's speaking to an audience and that it's part of a larger sort of. I mean, the Long and Long Ago is directly called a symphony. This is sort of like a smaller, less noisy symphony. But I both of those plays are two of the plays that I wanted to do because I had done a lot of plays that were more with the older Danny, and even though Danny is an adult here, and he has the ending scenes with the grabby, abusive female boss, it's a play that I think you get the sense that the writer, me in real life, is looking back with fondness on that time. In the same way, I think Long and Long Ago, you get that same sense of fondness. And, again, even within the play, and anyone who just reads or watches an enactment of that play would get the sense that I think that Mrs. Calabash is the reference back to Mo Gonzalez. And for all of the plays that they... What?
You would say that it's from any of the female characters or perhaps some kind of metaphor. It's an interesting way to end the play.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I thought I have to say the quote unquote seduction scene I thought was pretty hysterical for the most part. How she tries to get him off with all of her bizarre and slang terms in order to turn him on or something.
Well,
and when he sort of just consigns himself to playing her so that he can get the key.
And yeah, and there's I forget the actual moment, but you can in the play it becomes a look on Danny's face, and he finally gets it that in order to get out of there, he's going to have to pretend and that he likes her. And
he sort of realizes something like that is going to happen earlier when he's reading Slaughterhouse Five.
Yeah.
Because when she leaves the room, he sighs.
Yeah.
As if something else is coming.
Yeah, and the character of what do I call her?
Lenore.
Lenore. The character of Lenore is a character that she you didn't really hear much of a Spanish accent on her when she was normal, but when she was trying to be sexy, she'd be like, "Oh, La Bamba, La Bamba," she'd use names like that for me. I'm like, La Bamba. What the fuck is that? Oh, come on, Bamba. Come on, Bamba. And you get that she's trying to, because I guess she thought that all white guys must have liked Latinas, so she was trying to act more Latina than
she also tries to indulge some sort of bizarre fantasy where she wants to be his slave girl.